Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. First, I would like to thank Tyler and his strategic network and his invitation. And second, I feel great honor to stand here to talk about the Chinese perspective. I must say, I'm quite different from Ambassador Florence. I'm a pure scholar and researcher all my time in the university. And I kind of see this is a Chinese perspective. And also, because we have 4 more Chinese scholars in this room, I can only represent myself. A Chinese, that is me, not my Chinese scholars. And I do my speech not for governmental propaganda. And you already witnessed that in the last 3 years, China is quite active and positive involving the Middle East issues. I'm not talking on the dynamic change. It's hard for me to think about, but I would like to introduce some of the Chinese diplomatic work. From this, you can find China's perspective. In the last 3 years, China actively involved in Syrian crisis, Iran nuclear talks, Israeli-Palestinian peace talks, and Arab Spring and political transition. For the Syrian crisis, China uses veto powers along with Russia 3 times. And most recently, Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi, he attended Geneva talks and suggested another 5 principles to address the Syrian crisis. This is our new Foreign Minister, Wang Yi. And I don't want to talk the details of the 5 principles. For Iranian nuclear talks, China also quite active involving in the framework of a P5+1. And most recently, Chinese Vice Foreign Minister suggested another 5 principles to address the solution of Iranian nuclear issues. Just several days ago, in the second phase of the Geneva nuclear talks. And for the Israeli-Palestinian peace talks, last year, Chinese new President Xi Jinping invited both Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas to visit China, nearly at the same time. But the 2, they miss each other intentionally. They don't want to have peace talks in Beijing. But Chinese President do suggested 4 points to address the Palestinian issues. This is very rare for a Chinese president, top leader, personally to articulate the principles, the detailed principles, but he did. And for the Arab Spring and political transition, 2 months ago, Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi, when he visited Algeria on December 21st, he articulated 4 supports to Arab countries. Why I mentioned December 21st? Because 50 years ago, when former Chinese Premier Zhou Enlai, he visited, look at this picture, when he visited Algeria at the same day, December 21st, he articulated Chinese 5 principles to address China's relation with Africa and Arab countries. 50 years later, Chinese Foreign Minister at the same day, also in Algeria, to address nearly the same thing. Chinese literature. I'm sorry.
Very good.
I'm sorry. I forgot to translate it. Our 5 principles articulated by our former 50 years ago. But now this is a new one. New 4-point Chinese supports actually can find there are several principles that is nearly the same. For instance, Chinese respect sovereignty of Arab and African countries and support the peaceful solution of their problems and respect the country's development road. Now, at this critical time, I would say these new 4 points to Arab countries represent China's conclusion toward last 3 years Arab Spring. If you ask me, does China have something to give the Arab countries? I must say yes. That is Chinese model of development. Of course, China don't want to exert this to other Arab countries. Because this is Chinese experiences for its speedy development in the last 3 decades. 3 keywords for Chinese new Arab policy. That is development, stability, unity. Without stability and unity, you cannot receive development. In this way, our foreign minister said, in their course toward development, stability, and unity, China will stand alongside the Arab nations. This is, I understand, this is China's soft power. Actually, this already get positive feedback. When Hosni Mubarak, a Chinese law friend, overthrew it, Muslim Brotherhood came to power. They also came to visit China, Morsi himself. That gave Chinese confidence, Chinese leaders confidence. Our new leader, he frequently articulated 3 confidence. Confidence of Chinese socialist system, political system, or Chinese Communist Party's leadership, and China's development road. Now this time, our foreign minister openly mentioned this to address China's relation with Arab Spring countries and rest of other Arab countries. So another issue, China, Russia in the Middle East. You will find China and Russia jointly vetoed UN Security Council's resolution against Syria. Is there anything implemented with Russia? Look at this picture. This is an exchange of leadership between China and the old generation and the new generation. On the left is our current new leader, Xi Jinping. With the left, our old leader, Hu Jintao. The new leader, top 7 leaders, most of them, they were born in late 1940s or early 1950s. That is to say, when New China was established, the top leader, they were very little. Through 1950s and early 60s, Russia, so former Soviet Union, had a large scale of influence over Chinese. At that time, most of the foreign language, the most popular foreign language is Russian. Now, this new generation, most of them, they still know very well about Russia. Last year, when our new president, Xi, he gave a speech to Moscow School of International Relations, he publicly mentioned that Russia and China and Russia relations is the best bilateral relations, and also the most important relations. He said that, most important, not US. And later, the foreign ministry, in his website, when he translated into Chinese language, he secretly amended this as one of the most important. But if you look at the Chinese, he publicly mentioned that most important bilateral relations. Recently, our new leader, he came to visit Moscow, Sochi Winter Olympics. And the 2 leaders, they have a joint video talks to China, Russia, Navy ship captains. You know, Russia, China, Norway, and Denmark, 4 countries, they jointly help Syria to dismantle its chemical weapons. And China and Russia worship in the same group. So the 2 leaders have a video talks to the 2 countries' Navy warship captains. And last year, when our new president visited Russia, Putin accompanied him to visit Central Command headquarters of Russian armed forces. You can find this. This is a very deep bilateral trust between each other. And also maybe from another point of view, you can understand why China joined Russia to jointly veto the Syrian resolutions. Because our time is very, very short, I will quite brief. China-US in the Middle East. Since our new leader come to power, they articulate a new concept, that is, try to build a new model of major country relations with the United States. Last year, when President Xi visited the United States in California, he defined the meaning of the new model of major relations. That is, three points. No conflict or confrontations. Second, mutual respect. And third, win-win cooperation. So later, when Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi, he gave a speech in Brookings, he further mentioned that the relation between China and US is not G2, not G2. We don't seek that. But China is ready to shoulder international responsibilities with its national strengths and realities, together with the United States, offer more quality public goods for the international community. That is to say, China and the United States, they have many common interests in the Middle East. The two countries want to have more deep cooperations. One of the things, as I understand, recently, our foreign minister, when he answered the question by Qatar correspondent, he mentioned that China would like to join the quartet. Currently, quartet comprises four aspects: United Nations, European Union, Russia, United States, and United States, the leading country. And China openly said that we would like to join if the four other powers invite China to join in. That is to China want to contribute to the Israel-Palestinian talks. But look at this picture. 3 days ago, Obama met Tibet's spiritual leader, Dalai Lama, in White House. Yesterday, immediately, Chinese Foreign Ministry condemned the US. The new power relations should be based on mutual respect, just as the president mentioned that. From Chinese side, we think this is not mutual respect. This is managing Chinese internal affairs. In contrast to current Arab Spring, Ukraine, and other countries' internal riots and instability. China focuses on its internal stability. Without stability, without development. So you can say China's cooperation with the United States is not so easy. Not so easy. In contrast to China's cooperation with Russia. In the Middle East, there are many things need China and the United States to cooperate each other. Actually, in current strategic dialogue between China and Russia, there are more than 300 programs or 300 items to be discussed with Iran nuclear issues and Syria, Arab Spring, many issues. So for China, we want to have a efficient and mutual respected relations with the US. In that way, that could try to guarantee the stability of the Middle East. And stability in the Middle East is the most public goods for China, because in this area, China is one of the major trade partners. Yesterday, our Foreign Minister Wang Yi in Iraq, and Iraqi Prime Minister Maliki met him. Maliki said, China is the Iraqi largest trade partner. This is another Middle Eastern country. Actually, China already become many Middle Eastern countries' largest trade partner, oil and no or other goods. So, I just want to say, in the current dynamic change in the Middle East, how to deal with those questions, especially major power relations, is quite important. Thank you all.
Here is that as important as power relationships are between and among states, and especially shifting power relationships, right? Are we seeing a power shift from the West to the East, from the G8 to the G20? Probably yes, that's true, and those relationships are important. But perhaps more important is this, or at least more disruptive, is a sort of atomization of power. That what Moises Naim calls micropowers, small entities, not necessarily states, they have the ability to overwhelm, circumvent, and undermine what we previously thought of as power. That if you think about the novel about Gulliver's Travels, Gulliver is tied down by the Lilliputians. That's really the idea that we're talking about here. That there are many smaller powers that cannot exercise a great deal of influence on their own. They do have a great deal of negative power. They can stop things from happening. They can constrain. They can keep other powers from doing what they would like to do. That, for instance, China's rise will be constrained by a lot of these micro powers that I'm going to spend just a minute or two talking about. So we talked about these micro powers have the ability to overwhelm, to circumvent, to undermine. What are these micro powers? Think about multinational corporations, right? Think about non-governmental organizations. Think about armed groups, terrorist groups, or other militias. Think about transnational criminal organizations. There's any range. Newspapers, you mentioned Al Jazeera, the media is important. Citizens movements, there are all kinds of micro powers, small powers, that we don't traditionally think of in these great power relationships, but they greatly influence not only the international system, but also how power is distributed within a state and how power is exercised within that state. So how did we get here? I think this is largely a story of success, that there is more of everything today than there was yesterday. There are more countries today than there used to be. This is largely the result of popular sovereignty, of the ability of self-determination of peoples. So we have more states, which means more countries in the United Nations or in other international organizations, which means that it is harder to make decisions because there are more parties at the table. In addition to more countries, we have more people, just more people on the planet than we used to. We have more education. There's still plenty of people who are not educated. I'm not saying that we have reached the zenith of education and welfare among our world citizens. But there is more education today than there was 50 years ago. There is better health care today than there was 50 years ago. People are living longer today than they were before. This is not evenly distributed. We haven't reached all of our goals. But almost anything you want to measure, there is more of it today than there was 50 or 100 years ago. More connectivity, more technology, more money moving around the globe, more banks, more media organizations, more philanthropies, more almost everything. And this has a tendency to overwhelm states because there are just so many more things that they have to do with it, that they have to deal with. Not only is there more of almost everything, but that more stuff and more people is also more mobile. People move more easily today than they used to. Ideas, especially, move more freely today than they did in the past. That has consequences for power. It's easier to move ideas, and with the exception of the great Chinese firewall, it is difficult to keep ideas out of societies. And even within a state like China that has done a very good job of creating a kind of walled garden. There are still ideas that percolate within China, right? The citizens are more connected to each other now than they used to be. All of this has led to a change in the mentality of citizens. Values and expectations have changed from what they were, say, 50 years ago. People expect more of their governments than they did 50 or 100 years ago. That is a great challenge to states. They cannot fulfill all of the expectations of their citizens. Many of these expectations are unrealistic, right? But it doesn't matter because they still exist. People still expect certain things of their governments that because of NGOs, because of the media, because there are simply more people to deal with, governments have a hard time adjusting to. So this is a good and bad situation, right? Because we have more education and healthcare and economic opportunities, this is helpful to citizens. This is what we, as governments and as thinkers and thought leaders, want to see happen. We want more opportunities. We want less opportunity for monopolies and tyrants and those sorts of things. We want better healthcare for our people. But the other side of that coin is that with more people empowered, they have just enough power to exert influence, but not enough power to get anything really done. That we have more institutions and more individuals with this negative power that can constrain states and corporations. But it is becoming increasingly difficult to impose ideas in the international system, even good ideas in the international system. I mean, let's recognize that the system of states established after World War II was largely established by a few great powers imposing their will on most of the rest of the world. I do not think that's possible today. That might be good, that might be bad. I don't make a value judgment on it. But it is something that we need to consider as we think about how best to help our policymakers view the world and what their ability to influence strategic developments is. So I don't have an answer. I hope that all of you might have some answers and some thoughts. I only raise the issue to point out that while we as especially international relations and security scholars tend to focus on power shifts and relationships between states, for instance, what does the rise of China mean for international security? What does the Euro crisis mean for economic development and security? Those are actually the easier questions to deal with. What might be more of a challenge is how the decay or the constraints on power affects how decision makers think about what they want to do, how they make the decisions that they're making in the future, and what results those decisions might have. So again, I have no answers. All I can do is ask questions. The smart people are in the audience, so I hope that you have some answers and other questions to raise. So if you have a question or you have a comment, I invite you to go to one of the microphones that are placed in the aisle. Vladimir, please go right ahead.
Thank you. Vladimir Orlov, Pearson from Moscow. My question, common question, will go to Dr. Wang, and thank you very much for your comprehensive description of the Chinese views on the Middle East. In my view, since many of us met here last time at the same place in November 2012 at the previous Strategic Studies Summit, there were three major shifts in the Middle East, and they should be viewed holistically, not just separately. The first one is the fact that in Syria, the attempt to change the regime under the pretext of democracy so far failed. Instead, there is cooperation effort in place. You mentioned it partly. The ships of Russia, China, Denmark, Norway, but of course Russia-US cooperation of destruction of chemical weapons in Syria. The second is Iranian nuclear issue, which we will be discussing at one of the working groups here, and also a major change compared to November 2012. At those times, very few believed something can be done with Iran. Many were skeptical that Iran is, any negotiations to Iran are applicable. Today we are discussing details of the progress, but not the progress itself. And the third one is, of course, the move from Morsi to Sisi in Egypt, so from democracy to stability choices. My question to Dr. Wang is, of course, whether you agree with this pattern or maybe you see it differently. And if you agree, do you see it as a strategic change in the Middle East, or just a tactical one? It's a question also I asked myself, whether what we see in Syria is a strategic change from our attempt to oust the government, or it's just tactical, and just in a few months from now Americans will tell us, okay, chemical weapons are gone, now we need to change the regime in Syria. Maybe the same will be applicable to Iran when the nuclear issue is solved. You can continue on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Vladimir. Dr. Wang, please.
Thank you for your question. For me, I think Syria issues is not regional issues alone. I think it's international issues. In play, all the big powers bargaining inside. One of the reasons for U.S. Don't want to use military forces, one of the reasons I think is the sectarianism in Syria. And unpredictable consequences of the post-Assad era. We all know, we already found that the so-called the Daesh, ISIS, spreading now in northern Iraq, Syria. Terrorists are Islamic extremism in the post-Assad era. Nobody can give a clear answer. Maybe this is one of the reasons for the big powers. They are more carefully to launch a military attack, just like what they did in Libya case. For China, we also think this is a bad lesson for Libya. And the same for Russia. They think the bad lessons. Maybe many people, even now, many people, two days ago, article issued from Hayat criticized China and Russia. They think China and Russia should be responsible for current dilemma in what happened in Syria. But for us, we don't think so. We think at least for China, we think. We use the power of veto power to execute our task. As a prominent member, we should say something. Veto or abstain or yes. But unfortunately, Syria issue touches China's political principle, that is political stability. That represents China's core interest. We cannot easily abstain, just like we did in the past. So, I agree with you. Syria issues is strategic issues. But at the current status, I don't find any clear and easy resolution for that. Thank you.
Good news is, sir, please, as you're moving to the microphone. So Syria, Iran, those sorts of issues, incredibly complex, Vladimir. You know, thankfully, your working group is going to give us all of the right answers on Iran. We'll have several good people talking to us in later sessions about Syria. So we'll examine these issues in more depth later. I just wanted to flag that. for people. Yes, sir, please.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, for giving me the floor. I have a question to Professor Wang, since his presentation was very, very stimulating, and thank you very much for that. I was really interested and excited to hear about your presentation. You raised few questions and touched upon few things, but I am afraid I couldn't get the answer, which I am very much interested to know. I know that, as you said in your presentation, that relation between China and US in the perspective of Middle East is very difficult one. You raised one point, the issue of Dalai Lama, but there are more issues which are very, very contesting and is there for about few decades. Like if I can say about the strategic ambiguity of USA in regards to Taiwan issue. They have signed the TRA and at the same time selling weapon to the Taiwan. So which I think China doesn't take it at all positively. So keeping those things in mind, as you raised and you said it's difficult, but I just want to hear your view. How do you see the relation between US and China unfolding in future? And what is the impact is going to have on the Middle East, especially the region? Thank you very much.
Thank you for the question. Very good question. Since I'm not expert specialized in Sino-American relations, I just answer your question in the Middle East part. Maybe this is the mirror to reflect Sino-American relations, because Middle East is a very important region. Currently, many people talk about American possible retreat from the Middle East because American growing energy dependence for itself. At the same time, China became the largest energy importer from the Middle East. But I would say it's not easy for US to withdraw from this area. Many Arabs, if you read Arab articles, talk with Arab people, a big concern now currently about US is a decreasing role in addressing Middle Eastern hot issues that push the local regional player to become unified, try to tackle their problems alone. Just as I know, Saudi Arabia and GCC in recent years, because they disagree with US for, I blame US the lack of ambitions to address serious issues. So the foreign ambassador in London published last month in an article, if US don't want to address that problem, we will do it by our own. You can find the differences between them. For China, at my understanding, I just represent myself. I don't want China take the place of US in the Middle East. One basic reason, China is still a developing country. In other words, we are a poor country. Not like the wealthy American United States. You want to take the burden of Palestinian issues? Welcome. You want to play more role in the Middle East? Welcome. But you should contribute more investment, more money in that region. At the same time, I don't think US would block China's role in that area. But of course, there are big differences, big concern. We worry from US. But for us, we would like to have US stay in this region to combat terrorism that is also in China's interest, and try to US stay in this area that will don't allow US put more its energy in East Asia. So personally, I totally agree US should stay in this area. That's a fair time. Because this now in this area just has a changing dynamics in this area. Now so many rising power, I agree with you, non-government, non-state factors need interstate cooperation. U.S. for a long time play a very important role in this area. Currently, it's hard for China to take American role, even Russia. I suggest collective security. All the countries, responsible countries, to contribute their effort to try to build a stable Middle East. That's good for every country. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. As we're again waiting for our guest to reach the microphone, I would only add a couple of thoughts. I know your question was directed to Dr. Wang. He rightly mentioned that he's no Sino-US expert. Neither am I, but not being an expert has never stopped me from offering an opinion before, so it won't stop me now. You asked about the Sino-US relationship, and you mentioned
Unfolding in future.
right, exactly, and that you mentioned the friction points of Tibet and Taiwan and these sorts of things. Look, the United States and China will rub up against each other, just like the United States and the Soviet Union rubbed up against each other, like the United States and Russia. All sort of great powers will do that. They have different interests in different spheres. But, as Dr. Wang pointed out, the Middle East especially, and Central and South Asia to a lesser extent, but especially in the Middle East, the U.S. and China tend to have a convergence of interests that I think can be used to great effect in helping to build that great power relationship moving forward. Maybe it's because I'm an American, I don't buy into the thesis that the United States is in some kind of permanent state of decline. I don't think that's the case, and I think recent economic numbers would show us that that's probably a reasonable bet. That those who have bet against the United States in the past have lost that bet, and so I don't think it's safe to bet against the U.S. And I don't say that just because I'm an American, but because over time that's proven to be the case. I also don't think it's a safe bet to bet against China, right? But those two entities can and do work together on a range of things. So I see the Sino-US relationship unfolding very positively, especially if we focus on the region where so many of the people in this audience are from. And that's why it's so important for you all to have those solid relationships with each other, but also with Americans and Chinese to help us work better together, because if we are disagreeing, then you all pay the consequences for that, and that's not fair. So you have a very strong role in ensuring that this relationship unfolds positively and to your benefit. Sir, please.
Thank you, Dr. Mohammad Khan from Pakistan National Defense University. First of all, I have a few comments and then questions. Comments particularly with respect to the most contested aspect of the concept of the power you mentioned, pandemic. Indeed, what I feel today that as far as soft power is concerned, it has been diversified. The centers have changed overall. I would say that maybe the media, maybe the, as you mentioned, that MNCs, IGOs and NGOs and all that. And these three corporations, I would say that global corporations promote today 70% of the global economy. And as far as the center of the hard power is concerned, that lies somewhere still in Washington, I would say, at the level of superpower. Having said that, I would be coming over to the Middle East, and in the Middle East I would be asking a question from Ambassador that you emphasized on use of soft power, role of democratization for that matter, for the region and all that. Where this economic integration and so many things, commerce and trade, processing and progressing there. But my concern is that without resolving the core issue, that is the cause of concern in this region, we are, I think, moving over to the peripheral issues, and maintaining the core issue would give birth to many more issues. And today we have many mushrooming of issues in the Middle East, and whatever instability is going on in the Middle East, it is because of the unresolved nature of the Palestinian issue. I think we need to concentrate on that, so that the region is back on the, you can say, the path of stability. My Chinese friend, you said that what China has for the Middle Eastern countries to give is a model of progress, that is developmental model. Definitely that is something great. But in return, would you be asking or looking for something that is in the field of economy, commerce, trade, investment, and definitely. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Unfortunately, this will have to be the last question that we have time for. So, Ambassador Florenzi first. Dr. Wong?
Yes, well, I think you are right. But thinking that you are right doesn't mean that neither do nor me to have a solution. You are right in the sense, and I think that we all agree, that if we do not solve the core issue of the Middle East Arab-Israeli conflict, it's going to be very, very, very complicated all over the region. And that the processes of democratization may be interfered by the fact that there is this central issue. But I do not have a solution, and unfortunately, we haven't found a solution for a long time. What I can say is that, as I said in my speech, as far as we can bring about democratic societies in the Arab world, this will be even a positive ingredient to find a solution of the core issue. So it is a positive ingredient that can be added to. In all cases, even where we have an open war, as it is now in Syria, as it has been in Libya, and complicated situations that may appear and will appear in different countries, there has to be an internal solution. As I was saying, I am an expert mainly of the soft power. And the soft power has the advantages of the soft power, its lasting influence in the long run. Countries that have, for example, around the Mediterranean or the Maghreb countries have more than 70% of their commercial trade with the European Union, so we can build on that for shared prosperity and so on. But if there is no internal solution, of course you can resort to hard power if you have it. But it has the disadvantages as well of the hard power. And wherever it has been used, the results have been much worse. And you're going, not only I'm referring to Iraq or to Afghanistan, can go referred most recently and with the European clear intervention in Libya. I think that the poor Libyans are much worse now than they were, and they were in a very bad situation under Gaddafi. So you can resort, if you have it, to the hard power, where the assured results are not assured results. At least the assured results are more bad results than good results. So you have to rely finally on the internal change, and you can accompany what people can achieve internally. And that's what has to be done. And from outside, I would resort to this collective responsibility. Of course, there is a lot of change now, for example, in Ukraine and the Arab world and in the Middle East. And the landscape is completely changed now. The new role, for example, I see here in Barcelona, of Turkey is of immense importance. And it will be more so. The new role of Russia, especially now with the crisis in Syria, and it will be increasing in the following years over the region. Of course, the mainly economic influence of China. So we can have an agreement for collective security. But if there is no internal way towards solution, we will stay with the skinny cows. And we have to help the people to get agreement internally and help them to find a solution and to build consensus. Only on that basis. And that means a lot of soft power and diplomacy, maybe. And it takes time. And it takes suffering if we do not get a solution right away. The problem is that if you go the other way, the consequences may be worse. But of course, we can use traditional power, so to say, to correct some of the things. I very much agree with this distinction about with these thoughts about the new shape of power exercise, the lose of the monopoly of the use of force of power by the states, of this limited exercise of small powers that can influence, preventing the traditional powers of states to do what they have to do. We can cooperate in preventing these Lilliput bad boys to do their bad job. That would help a lot the good boys to find consensus toward the solution. And this is of enormous importance in the countries in conflict. And that means that collective responsibility should play its best diplomatic skills to prevent some of the traditional state powers to use its power in a bad way, or in a way regarding only their selfish interest and manipulating conflicts in their own profit. Because in the long run, it is not positive, not fruitful, not even for them. They are wrong. The benefit for all is the benefit of normality, of people living with growing possibilities. It was said that we have more of many things, most of them good things that people want to have and to enjoy and to produce and to exchange, etc. This is the way we have to try to build. Of course, it takes time, but it is a sounder way. Thank you.
Now, Dr. Wong, if I can ask you to be relatively brief, because I have an announcement about beauty and money to follow your. So stay with me when Dr. Wong is done.
I'll be very quick. To answer your question is very difficult. For a long time, there's a harsh debate between democracy and development. Who is the first? Democracy push and accelerate development and progress and prosperity, or the later push forward democracy. But for Chinese experiences, we focus on stability and then development. For course, there's a bad stability, just like the former Arab dictator likes to do that. For us, we focus on the good governance. Now in China, our new slogan is the government, ruling party, try to create good governance and modernized governance. So maybe when we think about what happened in the Middle East, Arab Spring, and the developing countries in the general, we should try to think another pattern, not only democracy and its progress relationship. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Okay.